We are live. We're live. Coming into you live on a Friday where I don't know about you, but it is the last day of school, which means that we made it somehow miraculously. My kids are donezo. I don't know why I'm celebrating because it means now I'm stuck with them. But I'm just really proud of everyone and all the teachers and everyone who got us here for this conversation. Okay. Hi, everyone. Let's get Amanda here. Where is she? Okay. Hi. People are coming. Okay, so once I see Amanda, then oh, there you are. Okay. How do I go live? Go live. I wish they could just cut out all of this back, like so you don't see the behind the scenes. Hi!
Hi.
We did it.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, and I've also been like low-key shitting my pants.
Well, this is my first Instagram live.
Wow.
So have I.
I'm honored that you're doing the IG Live with us. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
We are huge fans of you at Not Safe for Mom group. We never call you by your first name, like even on text, we're like, so Arbor and Wood, because
Yeah.
to our team, you're more than a human being. You're like an icon, a vision. You've just really, you've educated us. You've set such a wonderful example as a mother. You lead our community by example and the things that you share. And you're so inspirational. So we're just really grateful for the work that you've done. And I want to just thank you because I have never had the opportunity to say that. So thank you.
Thank you. That's so sweet. Thank you so much.
So for the people who maybe for some reason don't know, this is Amanda Faun. Am I saying your last name right?
Yeah.
Okay. And she is a writer, an activist, an advocate, a mother of four, a home educator, and the founder of the Instagram account Arbor and Wood. And if you've been following Not Safe for Mom group, you would have seen that we post a lot of her content because it's so fucking good. And she just has such wonderful things to share, especially around anti-racist education. But today, we're going to be talking about something else that is very important to Amanda and to me, and especially in terms of it being Pride Month, and that's what today's conversation is going to be, because both of us have experience with kids who don't follow the gender normative gender binary. But before we go into that in detail, I wanted to just first kind of understand like how you got into this work a little bit, because I know it wasn't always advocacy on your public facing page.
Yeah. I up until the summer of 2020, I was an influencer. And so I've actually had my page for about 3 years now. So the first 2 years, I was just doing the mommy influencer thing. And then, of course, the murder of George Floyd happened last summer in my hometown of Minneapolis. And while activism has always been a part of my life, it's how I was raised. I hadn't shared a lot of that part of me in my public space, and there were a lot of reasons for that. But I knew at that point that I needed to use whatever small platform that I had to at least try to draw attention to these bigger issues. And as I began to slowly add in that kind of content, I just became more called to using my space in that way. I was never fulfilled doing the work of, influencer marketing. I wasn't necessarily fulfilled in the social circle I was in. And it just became such a huge part of my life in real life, that I knew that I had to continue on with that calling. And so now it is pretty much what I do full time.
And what I've noticed is that, if you look back in your Instagram, you can see that you have these beautiful curated images of your home, and your kind of design and fashion. But you take that ethos and you bring it into the way that you curate this very serious, very important content. And I think that's what makes it so accessible to people, that you're telling them hard truths, but I'm a little late, but I'm here, Mom. You're telling them hard truths, but you make people see it. You make people pay attention because you have that designer's eye. And I think that's the combination of those two things. You've been doing this for so long, but you've had this other thing to say that's making it so successful and having such an impact, and hopefully, especially on mothers. And I think that that's such an important group to reach out to, because we're raising this next generation.
Yeah, I sometimes get a lot of pushback.
That's what I was
about making these hard topics aesthetic. Part of that is just, like I said, I worked as an influencer and a brand photographer. So aesthetics just are important to me in general. But I will say this, it is purposeful. What I noticed being, especially in the mommy influencer space, was that people were only going to share things and interact with things that were visually appealing to them. And so when I started adding these things into my feed, I wanted them to fit in seamlessly with the rest of what I was doing. And in that way, like the sphere that I was in at that time, sort of like tricking them into like paying attention to, not just a beautiful living room, but to real life issues as well. And so, yeah, I mean, aesthetics is a part of it. And it's just kind of reality that, Instagram is a visual space. And my goal as an educator right now is to draw in as many people who want to do this work with me as possible. And, I say with me because I very much want anybody who comes into my space to understand that I am a work in progress. And that I am doing this work alongside of you, and that I'm not asking you to do anything that I haven't already worked through myself.
And that really comes through in the things that you say and how you describe the work that you're doing. It doesn't come from a place of like, I'm better than everybody. It's like, join me in this process. I heard you recently talk about how it was, I think on a podcast that you did, about pride. One, you were talking about pride. You were saying that the way that you see your audience consuming your content, you feel like they come more for the anti-racism content, but when you start to talk about LGBTQ issues, you don't feel like they're as engaged. And I wanted to hear your thoughts on that, you know, what you think the reason is behind that.
So I think, I am very lucky to have a small LGBTQ following and, a few parents who follow my work because they know I'm queer and have queer kids, and they want that sort of community. But obviously, the majority of my audience is straight. Um, I think that they do not view LGBTQ issues as being their problem. Um, I think that they are sympathetic to these issues. I think a lot of them want to learn and want to do better, but they still don't get the connection
Mm-hmm.
between, like, all of these threads are connected. So racism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, nationalism, all these things converge.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't just pull at one single thread and think that that is enough.
Right.
The other thing that I try to get my audience to understand, because many of them are parents, most of whom have young children.
Right.
I need them to understand that you don't know that you don't have an LGBTQ child. You know, that is an assumption that you're making. And, while you want to be supportive of me talking about my queer kids, you don't think it's a you issue.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very easy to tune that kind of stuff out. And what I'm trying to say is if you are a parent of young children, it might be a you issue. And regardless, there is value, right, to educating yourself about these things, because we all interact with people in the real world. And if we think of ourselves as empathetic beings, we need to know how to best interact with and be an allyship with all different marginalized communities. People get into anti-racism and they get very, very myopic.
Yes.
They really, I'm a biracial woman, and so my focus is primarily Black lives and Black Lives Matter, but I talk about all different kinds of marginalized groups and how all of these things, as I said, are tied together, especially, if there's one message I want people to understand, it's that we cannot expect to be liberated in any way, shape, or form without bringing all of these groups along. It cannot be, just a single group that we're working for. We need to view this on a macro level.
It's so true. You can't pick and choose.
Yes.
And it's an us issue. It can't just be a you issue because you don't live on an island. You live in community. And if you aim to be part of a community, you need to constantly be in allyship with those in your community. And if you're not working to be in allyship with the people in your community, then you're not part of the resolution, you're part of the problem.
Exactly.
And what I find as the parent of a non-binary child who is very young is that we're constantly coming up against resistance. And that my child, since they were 3, 2.5, 3, when they've been expressing to the world, to everyone around them, who they were, they have been questioned, they have been blocked, and they've been, you know, they've been not affirmed, except by me and their father. And to this day, you know, I'll have a friend say, oh, I decided to join the PTA at my school because I met another parent who doesn't believe transgender kids should use the bathrooms and blah, blah, blah. And so, you know, I wanted to join the PTA, and I was like, that's great. I'm so glad you're taking a stand. And so we're at this barbecue, and my child says, by the way, I'm non-binary. I'm neither a boy or a girl, because they always want to tell people, just so you know. And her little girl was like, what does that mean? I don't, and like ran away. And it was awkward for her, my friend. She's like, oh, you know, like we talked about. And you could tell she has never had this conversation. Yes. And I was like, what happened to woke parent joining PTA? Like you didn't ever, and you know about my kid. So that's, I think, an example of this is always a you problem. Yes. Even if you don't know about you.
Right. Yeah.
I would love, not everyone knows who your family is, how old your kids are, what maybe some of their journey has been. I've shared it a lot on my platform, and I'll give a little more context. But I'd love to hear about what your life has been as a mother of queer kids. And they're a little bit older too now, so they've found themselves a little bit more and been able to affirm their identities. So I'd love if you could share that a little bit more with our community.
Yeah, so I have 4 biological kids, all girls. They are 2, 9, 14, and 24. And then we have an honorary member of our family, and he is just turned 21. So it has been quite a journey. My 14-year-old came out when she was in 4th grade. I knew that she was queer before that, but I wanted to just sort of make space for her to find her own way. Mm-hmm. And, you know, when she came out, for me, it was an incredibly easy transition because, you know, I am queer. My mom was queer. I was raised always in queer environments, so none of this was new to me. It was new to my husband, but he very quickly caught on, I guess I should say. You know, he was very supportive. However, we live in a very small rural town. There is not a lot of LGBTQ representation or minority representation in general. And so she had no idea how the outside world would receive her. And I almost feel guilty because I don't feel like I prepared her well enough for that. Because she found such a sense of acceptance at home, she went to school and just assumed that she could freely be herself and it would just be fine, right?
Right.
But unfortunately, that is not the reality. And it was especially difficult because she came out so young
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, I'm sorry, but the parents in my small, mostly white town are not having these conversations with their kids in the fourth grade.
Yeah.
And these kids have not been exposed to any of these things. And so we ended up pulling her out of school.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why I am a home educator, basically. So there was a lot of bullying that she had to work through.
Wow.
We are very, very lucky that our next door neighbors are a queer couple, and they were able to help us to find a child psychologist who was very well versed in these issues. And she has been seeing her now for 3 years. I will say she has a lot of mental health struggles, which are there anyways, but are very much exacerbated by identity issues, right? And so it has been a process to get her to a place where she is healthy and she is feeling whole in herself and her identity. And she's 14 now, and you know, she's wonderful. She's doing wonderfully. But it's been a journey.
Yeah. I think what people would love to know also is, what does it mean to create space for your child to feel safe, to or to even know how to express themselves, and say, I'm queer, I'm non-binary, I'm trans. People often ask me, and I always feel weird about this question, like, are they saying like, oh, it's your fault, you gave him this language, you gave them this language, like, how does he, I'll be like, my child is now they them, how does he even know those words? And I'm like, we've been reading books since they were a toddler. Our whole family has been reading these books together, and it's not like from day one they knew what non-binary meant or what trans meant or what queer meant or LGBTQ. It's just that you make it part of your daily life, and you have queer relatives and you have queer babysitters, and you just make sure your community involves lots of different people. I'm lucky too because my sister is queer, and she has really helped develop a lot of these conversations for my family and my parents who are, a little bit rigid. It definitely helps when you have relatives who are on your side. And we had babysitters, who really affirmed my child's identity. And I think those all created space for this to happen in a way that my child felt not only safe, but like fucking powerful in their identity. Even with pushback. And I've got to tell you, my area of Brooklyn is not like everyone's free. It's like, huh? Why are you wearing a dress? Still. But I think that's the main question I get from my moms in my community is, what did you do? How do you talk to your young kids about this? And I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I have the same reaction you do because I get this question all the time. I get this question in regards to race as well. Like, how do I approach this? How do I, make sure that my child is aware? And it's always difficult for me to answer because it's like, well, how do they not know? Because it's such a part of our life. But I understand that that's not true for everyone, and that's not a judgment. People have different lived experiences. But so, I always say that these things, first of all, need to begin as early as possible. And really, all this is about, when you are trying to create an accepting environment for children, is normalizing these things. So you can do that in so many different ways. And, I'll just give examples, because for me, I worried a lot because I was raised in Minneapolis and now I live in rural Wisconsin,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm raising these girls who are multiracial and not all straight. And I worried that I wouldn't, they weren't going to have access to the diversity in the culture that I grew up with. So I knew that I had to make that a priority in my home. And that is something anyone can do. And it's very, very simple. It looks like, as you said, it starts from the media that you consume. What TV shows are you watching? I'll just give you a small example. We, as a family, when my daughter was young, watched Modern Family every week. And, it sounds silly, but shows like that open up a dialogue, right? And so I just remember her being little and us watching this show together, and we very intentionally are like, Mitch and Cam are two dads, and that's, some families look like this and some families look like that. And she, answer your child's questions. Just that little bit of representation helps, and allowing them space to ask whatever it is that they need to ask. What kind of books do you have in your home? What kind of toys are your kids playing with? A very, very easy thing that I do now that I didn't do with my older girls is that when I introduce new playthings, I have them say, what do you think their pronouns are?
Mm-hmm.
And they get to choose, and that opens up a conversation about what pronouns are and how they can be used.
Wow.
Opens a door to talking about queer issues.
Mm-hmm.
It really just is being intentional
Yeah.
about creating opportunities for dialogue, right? And giving your children experiences that open up their worlds.
And especially, with young kids, they tend to put things in boxes. The really young kids, they're always compartmentalizing. A teacher looks like this, a bus driver looks like this, a mommy looks like this. And so it takes a lot of extra work to show them that there is a spectrum of all kinds of people and all different ways to be. And it does take work. It does take, you have to have all these different kinds of books. You have to have all these different kinds of shows. And you have to have all these different kinds of toys. And it is asking, I guess, more of yourself. But it really pays off when you have a happy child. I have to say, when I saw my child first struggling with their body and feeling like someone else in their own body, and looking in the mirror and saying, I hate, they were 5, and they said, I hate myself. I hate this. Why don't I look like, and put like a doll? Like they wanted to look like their Barbie doll. Why don't I have a different look? Why isn't my hair long? Why doesn't, and I knew what they were trying to say, you know, and so we started talking about, well, what would make you feel more like yourself? You know, and for them it was, let's go shopping, and let's go pick out some clothes for me. Let's grow my hair. And you know, we had to talk about those options, that you have options. There are options in our home.
Yes.
And they're available to you, because to see your kid hate their body, hate themselves when they look in the mirror at 5, is one of the most heartbreaking things as a parent. And I think we all can agree that our goal is we want our children to feel good in their own skin.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you know, my daughter went through that as well, not, you know, struggling with gender identity, but she absolutely went through, you know, the I hate myself and why am I different and why can't I just be normal? And it is the most heartbreaking thing because you see in them what they can't see in themselves. And you just know if they can work through it and you can give them as much support as you possibly can pour into them, that they can get to the other side, right? But it does mean doing a lot of extra work. And it does mean, you know, helping them to explore, finding ways like, how can we improve this? You know, how can we explore what will make you most comfortable?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when you spoke about the fact that it does require, you know, extra work, that is so true. And I think that that's what, I'm going to be totally honest, like a lot of parents struggle with that. I see parents struggle with that in terms of race as well. I think a lot of parents have this expectation that if their kids are in school or their kids are out in the world in whatever way, that that's enough, that that's exposure, that they're learning things, right? They go to school to learn things. And what I'm constantly trying to drill into parents is that these are issues of morality, right? These are value issues. When have you ever learned like serious moral values in an elementary school? That's not what children are there for. And in fact, these environments can have the opposite effect. And so this is your job. This is your job. This is part of parenting. I'm sorry. It's a lot of work, and not all parents want to do that, and that's a choice. But for parents who are asking questions about, you know, what books can I get, and what toys can I get, and all these things, and it's like, but it starts with the work that you are willing to put into it, and having that work be consistent over time. These are not one conversation issues, right? It's very much a parenting style.
And it's so interconnected. This just goes back to what you said in the beginning, that threads are all, that it's all one part of one big thing. For example, I know I have not done good work around the disability community with my kids, so that they'll be like, one of them will be the one that in the store will be like, why is that person missing an arm? Because we only had one book about difference in our house, and we don't talk about it, and we don't have a lot of people with limb difference in our house, in our world. And so if you see a person with limb difference or anything else that's different, they're like, huh, what? And then ask questions, versus like if it were just part of their everyday life or something we talked about. So that's my work. That's work I haven't done a great job on, because it's hard. It's like, oh, another thing to add to my library. So, but it's all part of the same thing. You can't just decide, I only want to focus on this. I only want to focus on anti-racism and LGBTQ stuff. There's all kinds of marginalized groups. We're all part of a community, and we have to take care of each other. And we start with children, and we start by exposing them to all the different possibilities and all the different ways to be good humans. And yeah, it's fucking hard. We signed up for it, right? There's so many questions. Amanda, do you mind if we go through some of the comments?
No, sure.
I've never seen so many questions in an IG Live. Let's see. Okay. And lots of nice notes to you. Someone wrote, I also feel like children are a lot more understanding and accepting than we think they are. It's the parents who make these conversations hard or awkward most times.
True. Mm-hmm.
How do we explain that others may not be as accepting outside the home, even though we are? And how do we respond or cope with that? You touched on that a little earlier. I can give my perspective also. I've said this many times to my kid, but when you can wear this dress, you can wear this skirt pant combination, but you know that people might say things about it that aren't nice. But mom is here with you, and I support what you are wearing all the way, and I think you look amazing. And we're going to go outside together. You're going to wear this skirt because that's what you decided you feel good in. And let's just see what happens, And that's what we would do. It was an exercise. We'd go with the expectation that it could be great. There could be people who say mean things. And the mean things come from a lack of understanding because they haven't had the conversations that we have had. And that people will say mean things all your life. People will call you a poo-poo head, and say that you smell like doggy do, or, whatever. Like, kids find anything to make fun of one another with. And this is just another thing. But eventually, people just accept that my kid is kind of just this like twinkle spirit fairy. They're Gavi. And don't really put them in a box. I slip too. They don't really put them in a box, and which I love, because they don't want to be in a box. But we talked about what could happen, but that I am there with them, and when I'm not with them, I'm still with them.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that my kids will all say that I'm a very overprotective parent. But I understand that I don't have any control over the world, and neither do they, right? And so even though I want more than anything to be able to put my kid in a bubble, that is not the reality of the world that we live in. So, basically what we, she, like I said, she's been in therapy, and a lot of that therapy has been building her confidence. And, I can't say enough about how impactful a supportive home environment is. And there is actual like scientific research having to do with LGBTQ children and the impact that even one supportive adult can have on their lives. So, we just need to move forward with the expectation that they are going to go out into the world and that not everybody is going to accept them, right? But our job is to instill in them this sense of like, I am who I am, and you're either going to accept me or not. The first time I took Kate to, she was elated, and we had bought her a whole, she had her rainbow t-shirt and her rainbow tube socks and her flag, and she was so overjoyed to be in a space where all these other people were like her. And I stepped away to go to the bathroom, and I came back, and there was a group of boys around her, and one of the boys was telling her that she was going to go to hell. So her first Pride experience, she had this traumatic homophobic run-in. And that was something we had to work through. And I will tell you, it's almost as though they were there for a reason, because it was kind of the worst thing that could happen. And she had to immediately confront it and work through that, like, those things are going to happen in life. And, it takes time for them to be able to build their confidence and their sense of self. But as you said, it's our job to continually reinforce that at home and be that safe space, that refuge from whatever might be out there in the world. And that's really all you can do.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you've really done that for your kids.
I try.
A lot of people have also asked, leading up to this conversation, but it's come up quite a few times in our community too. There are some moms that have discovered different parts of their sexual identity later in life, or are just realizing something that's been there all along, and are having trouble coming out to their families. And they're like, I'm a mother, I already have kids, or my partners know me as one way. How do I express this part of myself without feeling like I'm letting someone down? And then let's say I've expressed it to my partner and they're accepting. How do I tell my kids about this side of me? As a queer woman, I know you said that you've been this way your whole life, and so your kids have always known you as queer. But might you have any advice for people just coming out?
Well, I should say my kids didn't always know this.
Oh, okay, well then do that.
My youngest kids, yes, but like I said, my oldest is 24, and so I came out when I was 13, and I feel very lucky that I got to have like that full lived experience before I got married. But I get this question so much from women who are married or in a straight presenting relationship, women who have children, who realize, like you said, later in life that they identify as bisexual or pansexual, or they are exploring their gender and, you know, sexual fluidity. And so I will say that I am very lucky that I got to have loving relationships with both men and women before I met my husband and settled down and had this family. And it's heartbreaking for me that, you know, when I talk to some of these women and they are feeling like they got cheated out of something, right? Because, you know, I'm 30, I'll be 39 years old this year, and this was not something that was something we could talk about this openly, like back in the 90s, right?
Not even 10 years ago.
Yes. Yep. That's exactly right. And so, you know, now these folks are coming to terms with things that they weren't able to explore, and they're feeling, like I said, like they missed out on that part of their life. And all I can say is this, you know, if you're queer, you're queer. And there is no one like gatekeeping the queer community. There are no rules as to like, well, you can only come out if you come out before you get married, or you can only come out if, you know, you come out before this certain age. Like, the great thing about the queer community is the lack of boundaries, right? And so I encourage anybody who is exploring those things or who knows this about themselves, you know, to live that truth in an open way. Because if you don't, you are keeping yourself in that closet. And you deserve to live fully as who you are at your core, right? Which is why, you know, people find it very, very confusing that I identify as queer, as a woman in a straight presenting relationship, married with children, as though like me being bisexual somehow changed when I met my husband. You know, when I met my husband, I was in a relationship with a woman. And, you know, yes, I married a man, but that does not like erase anything else about my identity. And, yeah, so I would just say like, you only have one life. And if it were your child, you would want them to always be fully who they are. So give yourself that same space. And, you know, family is hard. Family is really hard. People get to know you as one thing, or, you know, people have known you as one thing your entire life. And a lot of people don't understand that humans evolve. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know why that's hard for people, but
Shame.
you know, yep. And we're all like working on ourselves if we're in a good place emotionally over a lifetime, right? And we're always finding these new facets of ourselves, and none of those things are wrong, right? It's just a part of you, and folks can either accept it or they cannot, and that's a them problem, not a you problem.
I feel like, I hope that our generation, our children's generation, will just have so many more options for who they can be and who they are and how they can describe it and affirm themselves. Because I know that growing up, I'm 41. There were only two options. You know, you're a boy, a girl, gay, straight, you know, and there's only one way to be a lesbian. Like, you're a lesbian
Yes.
and you look like this thing, you know. And I went to an all-girls school even, and it was like the lesbians were just in this corner, and there was no bisexual, there was no fluidity, there was nothing. There were no options. And so now, you know, I know that when I talk to other friends, other mom friends, and we hear about all these options, different ways that we could have been and that we could have explored and that we could have identified with, it feels like a loss. It feels like, oh, there's this whole other world that these younger folks are getting to take part in and identify with, and we just got put in these boxes. We didn't even know those were options, those were possibilities. And it's a shame, but the good news is that we don't have to make it that way for our children.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's why these conversations are so important.
Mm-hmm.
We also have a question. I hear questions like this too, but we asked specifically what questions people have for you. There are some people who are also concerned that their child gravitates towards gendered things. Like, well, should I be concerned that my son only wants boy things, or that my girl only wants girl things? And how do I fix that? Is that a concern? You know, is that
Yeah. So, I mean, I think parents get really lost in the minutia of all of this, right? So it starts with the messages that your children are getting from you about how things are gendered, right?
Mhm.
You know, clothing, toys, all of these things. I think what parents need to focus on is giving their children all of the options and then allowing their children to lead the way. So, for me, that looks like, with my 2-year-old, I am very, very intentional about keeping everything gender neutral. So, toys and clothes. I never ever talk about things in terms of like, we're going to go look in the boys section, or we're going to go look in the girls section, or these are the boy toys and these are the girl toys. It's just like clothes and toys, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very careful about not even choosing to put those things into categories. And I really just allow her to lead the way, right? And so she is a little person who very much gravitates towards both equally. So we have trucks and dinosaurs, and we have baby dolls and dress up clothes, and she'll do both at the same time, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, And so there are going to be some children who naturally gravitate towards this or that, and those things may be in alignment with the gender that they were assigned at birth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we don't need to worry about that as long as we are presenting them with multiple options, right? So that's really all this is about is allowing your child to lead you instead of you leading the child.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really hard for some parents.
Yeah, right. Because you want to feel in control. There's much about, we feel so out of control in so many ways that all the things that we can do to control our environment make us feel better. So
Right.
I think it's hard to let go in that way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask one last question, but I think it's a good one. How can we encourage the dads to do this work too? It feels like they don't have these same safe spaces like this. Maybe they do. Hopefully I'm wrong, this person says. But yeah, are we the only ones having this conversation? Probably very few dads are getting together and being like, how do we raise very open-minded kids?
Yeah.
But we need to pull them in.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yes.
And I feel like with the dads that I know, there is a little resistance at first to talking about this, or if it's your kid, there's resistance to accepting who they are if it's not binary, or if it's the sex they were assigned at birth and not normal. I was lucky in that my husband was very supportive. There was like a tiny bit of like, really, in the beginning, but then it was like, let's go shopping for dresses. And they're going to a pride event on Sunday together. And, that it's wonderful to have a partner who's on board. But I know not everyone has that because the male ego is very fragile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I will say, like, I actually think my marriage is a pretty good example to use. My husband is from a very conservative, very Catholic, very Republican family. And he married this, biracial, queer, non-religious person. And then we had, these kids. And I always knew, obviously, it was always a part of me that, like, there's a good chance that one of our kids will not be straight, or not, identify with the gender they were assigned at birth. But, it was difficult for him. And it wasn't so much that it was hard for him to accept, it's that he worried about his family and their ability to accept it. And that's a separate issue. But, it took a lot of conversations. It took a lot of, it's been, I don't know, like 5 years now. And we are still like educating him every day. Mm-hmm. And I will just say very plainly that, like, my husband doesn't like participate in any formal, like, this kind of thing, right? He's not like reading all the books and going to groups and all of these things. My advice is always, like, specifically to mothers, that, like, you are doing this work for you and for your children, right? As mothers, it's just kind of a truth that we are the primary caregivers. And as such, our children, a lot of the growth that they do and the messages that they receive come from us, right? And all you can do is focus on you and your work and passing that work along to your children. And my way of kind of like bringing my husband into it is just like constantly like feeding him tidbits, like there are some things he doesn't entirely get, right? And so we have to have like conversations. And my 14-year-old will do that, like, Dad, that's not the word we use, or we need to ask about pronouns or whatever it might be. And just her doing that, right, has made him like, oh, okay, like I need to do some growing here, right?
It's so great. It's good.
So, I mean, I just want to say it's hard.
Yeah.
It is hard because sometimes we are growing in ways that our spouse isn't. And that can be really difficult, but I really believe that if we are growing in a positive direction and we are kind of working that growth into our life and into our family structure, a lot of our partners are just going to naturally come along with us. And it might take some time and it might take some work. And for some people, it might take a lot of work. And I will say this, if it's seriously a struggle for you in your family, as somebody who is a former mental health professional, therapy is a wonderful, wonderful thing. Family therapy is a wonderful thing. I always encourage people, sometimes you need somebody from the outside to come in and kind of move things along.
Mm-hmm. I co-sign
Mm-hmm.
all the way. Couples therapy, family therapy, personal therapy. If I could be in therapy every day.
Yep.
All the
Same.
I value it so highly. Before we go, do you have any things that you want to make sure that our community takes away and that those who are listening can know about Arbor and Wood, about you, an action item, take away something?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm doing a series on my page about divesting from whiteness. And so what that means is my community is working through ways to move beyond allyship. I will say that my page is a hard space. It's for people who are really invested in doing hard work and exploring self first. And so we're just kind of looking at ways right now that we can sort of begin to decolonize our lives, our thought patterns, so we can be in better allyship, specifically with communities of color. So that's sort of what I'm focused on right now, and wrapping up Pride Month. And I will say, I will put up a question box on my page after this live, and you can go ahead and submit any questions that weren't answered, and I will do all of them.
Great. Yeah, because I'm seeing that I have some that I didn't cover. So I'll send them. I'll send the ones that I received there. But folks who are listening that had a question that they didn't want to post, that's a great way to ask Amanda questions anonymously. So definitely utilize that. And do you have a Venmo on your page as well? Anywhere?
I do.
Okay.
Yep, it's in Venmo and PayPal are in bio.
Great. Another way, if you love Amanda's work and you want to spread some gratitude, head on over to her page for that information too, because she does this work out of love, and I know that everyone who comes to Not Safe for Mom group sees it there, but also shares it. So if you've benefited from Amanda's work and you want to show appreciation for it, that's one way to show appreciation for all the work that she does. Thank you so much for being here and for spending time with us and all the wealth of information. I wish that you could have read all of the, I don't know if you saw, but so many people commented like your words were so validating, that this helped so much, that was exactly what they needed to hear in this moment. All the hearts. I mean, this was just truly a love fest, and I think really helpful and affirming for a lot of people that have had questions that they haven't felt comfortable enough to say out loud. But I think that you really spoke to the heart of what people needed to hear today. So thank you for Not Safe for Mom group to you, and for sharing so intimately your feelings and your experience with your family, your lived experience. It's really, really meaningful to us.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Have a great weekend, and I hope we get to do something together again.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.